Hari Om. Welcome back to another story from the Upanishads. And this time the story is about how a certain Upanishad got its name. Some of the Upanishads have names behind which there is a story. And so also it is with this Upanishad, and the name of this Upanishad is Aitareya Upanishad. We already saw a story about how the Aitareya Upanishad got its name. Today we will see how the Aitareya Upanishad gets its name. So it so happens once, long ago of course, there was a Brahmana by the name of Vishala, and this Brahmana Vishala had a boy, a child from his other wife, and she was called Itara. Itara itself means the other one. So from the other wife he had this child, and this Brahmana Vishala, one day he was sitting as a Yajamana in a yaga. That was his, that's what he did all the time as a Brahmana. So it happened one day that this child born to the Itara wife was looking at father sitting near the Homakunda, and this boy felt this urge to go and sit with his father. He wanted to go sit on his father's lap. Now the father could not allow this. The father had his own constraints because he was a Brahmana, and probably Itara, I don't know, maybe she was not a Brahmana from a Brahmana family, or it was simply because she was the other wife. But whatever the reason, the father did not allow the child to be with him during this yajna. And this child wanted to sit and the father would not allow. So the child obviously is sad and crying, and he comes crying to his mother. This whole episode reminds us of a young devotee that we have all heard about, isn't it? Very similar, and I know you have already guessed who that is. Yes, it is our little Dhruva. Yes, and this story is quite similar actually. And yes, this boy, being unhappy with what had happened, his desire not being fulfilled, went running to his mother Itara and told her all about it, how he so badly wanted to sit with his father, but father would not allow him. And here the mother felt very sad about it, and she was also very angry and upset with herself because she felt that it was some kind of weakness in her which had led to this whole situation. The whole thing of being the other wife, having a child, and now the child being denied its rightful affection and opportunity and a privilege. So she was very upset about what had happened, and she was more than anything upset with herself about it, and she just fell to the ground and she just invoked her Ishtadevata. And who was her Ishtadevata? It was Mahi, or the earth. And when she thus surrendered herself totally to her Ishtadevata, yes, Mother Earth came, manifested in front of her, and the mother asked Mahi, or Mother Earth, to bless her child. Now Mother Earth knew what was in this mother's mind, what was in Itara's mind, and she blessed this child with the highest knowledge, with the knowledge of that perfection which is seen in the Upanishads. What a privilege for that boy that he was blessed thus by Mother Earth herself. And after this, that child came to be known as Mahidasa, because this boy grew up and became well versed in this whole knowledge, and he gave to the world in his own simple language the whole knowledge about this highest, about the Brahman. And not just that, he also gave how one can actually attain that state, how one can attain that knowledge. And this whole thing is under one portion of the Vedas, and it is called the Aitareya Brahmana. Now, why Aitareya? Itara's son, right? Aitareya, and he was called Mahidasa, being blessed by Mother Earth and having dedicated himself to serve Mother Earth in this way. And thus, he gave us this Aitareya Brahmana, and the very precious, beautiful little Upanishad called the Aitareya Upanishad is housed in this Aitareya Brahmana. Now, this is the story behind the name. But having known this much about how the Upanishad got its name, let us dwell and see what is in this Upanishad. Every Upanishad is priceless, and every Upanishad has in it its own gems, its own ways of giving us knowledge about that highest truth. And the Aitareya also, the Aitareya Upanishad too, talks to us about the creation, because that is the very first thing, isn't it? For all of us, what is visible and where we live and what we interact with is our surroundings. It is the world. And so this Upanishad gives in a very beautiful manner how this whole creation came about. But it always emphasizes that before this entire creation came about, what there was the Brahman or the Atman. The Atman alone existed before the creation, and it is from the Atman that this whole creation has been manifested. Having said that, it talks about creation, and it has a very creative way of telling us about creation. In a very animated manner, this Upanishad tells how the Atman created so many creatures but found its fulfillment only in the instruments of human beings, only in the instruments of man. And that portion is indeed a very nice portion to read, because it is so animated and one can actually picturize as though those things actually happened. And it says that the Atman created all these and he entered in a specific manner into man, the crown of creation with the best of the instruments. Yes, we are those privileged human beings, isn't it? The Upanishad also in a very personified manner talks to us about the various organs and the way they function. The Upanishad actually talks about creation, yes, and having found its satisfaction in the instruments of man, and after that it has a very beautiful portion where there is a personified way of explaining about the various organs, their functions, and how they could not be complete without the Atman. And the Upanishad says that the Atman entered the human, entered the man. But if we think about it, Atman being everywhere, all pervading, we say, if it's everywhere, then why does it need to enter anywhere? Isn't it? So this point is also explained in a way that it has to be understood in a way how you would say that gold entered a bangle, or water entered a wave, or another example would be how the clay entered the pot. Now the pot is completely clay, the bangle is all gold, the wave is nothing but water. And when we say that the water entered the wave, it only means that there was a certain limitation which gave that form and a name called the wave. Or the gold is in and through bangle, of course, there was always gold, but when the bangle manifested, it is to say that the gold was as though limited by that form which got a name called the bangle. Now similarly, when we say the Atman entered the human, it simply means that it is as though the Atman was limited by this form of a human, and of course got the name human. So this is how one understands that the Atman entered. The Aitareya Upanishad also has in it the great declaration of the Upanishads, which are referred to as the Mahavakyas, one of the most prominent of the Mahavakya. There are 4, right? So there are 4 main Mahavakyas that are often quoted, and the very first one in that is Prajnanam Brahma, and Prajnanam Brahma actually appears in this Aitareya Upanishad. Basically, the Upanishad asserts that to know this creation, one must know oneself. And how does one know oneself? So it brings in the idea of consciousness and says that this whole creation is nothing but consciousness and consciousness alone. And what is this consciousness otherwise called? It is called the Brahman, Prajnanam Brahma. Now, Brahman is consciousness, creation is consciousness, Atman is consciousness, and so there is the union as though that there is no difference whether you say Atman or Brahman, and all that there is consciousness and consciousness alone. This is indeed the declaration of every single Upanishad. The whole Vedas and the Upanishads and the spiritual paths have come about only to give us this highest knowledge. While the starting ones are all preparatory portions, this is the most important, the final aspect that one must reach, which is in other words called liberation or moksha. So, Aitareya is another beautiful Upanishad, and I hope this story has inspired all of you who are listening to it to explore it further, just as I have been. And I have immensely enjoyed finding out the story here and narrating it in a way that seemed simple and right. So, I hope you all enjoyed this story, and may we all be inspired to dive more and more, deeper and deeper into the Upanishads and unearth all the gems that they offer us and fulfill this human life that we have been gifted with. Until we meet for another story from another Upanishad, Hari Om to all of you.